Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya wal Mursaleen. This is Mujeeb Kazi, and you're watching Dallas Roundup on the studio of I-95 Dallas Fort Worth. Muslims and the Christian leaders around the world historically have stricken dialogue on the basis of love of God and love of their neighbors. And these are the fundamentals that all faith shares, especially the monotheistic religions who share these very fundamentals. And these are the basic foundation, the common grounds for us to have a discussion with our brothers and sisters of following the other faiths. Probably that was the reason that when our mosque was threatened not very long ago, and we were very pleased to see at our mosque our very dear friend Lynn Nichols, who walked up to us and shared the same feelings. I'm absolutely honored and thrilled to have on my show Lynn Nicole, who is the senior pastor at the Church of Nazareth. And let me have him on the show. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, Mujeeb. You are my friend, and I'm thankful.
Well, I appreciate you giving us the time and standing up with us throughout these years. Let me ask you to give yourself a few minutes of introduction, because I know I have not done justice to your intro. Please go ahead. Give us the background of the church and your background as well, please.
Yeah. I am a longtime Church of the Nazarene, which is a Protestant part of the Christian church. Grew up in a pretty conservative church, felt a call of God at age 7 to go into the ministry, and I have followed that throughout the course of my life. Went to college and studied for the ministry, worked on a graduate program, a master's degree in the same thing. And so, and now for 35 years, I've been lead pastor of a church. This one is the third church I've been the lead pastor of. And the earlier ones were in Warren, Ohio, that's Northeast Ohio, for over 20 years. And then in Tampa, Tampa First Church of the Nazarene. And so I'm fairly new to Texas. So I'm a new Texan.
So what happened when we were threatened about a few years ago?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. I'll tell it quickly as I can, because it's really significant in my faith journey. Before I came to Texas, I was having a devotional time and reading the Bible and praying, and God clearly said to me that my response to Muslims was fear-based instead of spirit-based. And I've discovered God's always right, and so I shouldn't argue with him. And so I just simply said, I don't know how to fix that. And so I began to read things. Because I'd been in graduate school, I knew about Islam. I wasn't, ignorant of it, and yet I didn't know a lot, and had virtually no relationships with Muslims. And so I was living in a part of the country that I'm sure there were, but it was a very small demographic. So I moved to Texas, and shortly after I moved here, having had that conversation with God, having begun to study and try to help myself learn, that's when your mosque was threatened by Christians. And as I heard about it, I was in a meeting with my missionary president, and we talked about it and asked, what can we do? We need to do something, because the mosque is right around the corner. We are literally neighbors. And so we decided, well, we at least need to get our people praying for the safety of our Muslim brothers and sisters. And so we decided to do that. I walked out of that meeting. It was on a Wednesday. And once again, and it wasn't verbally, but God clearly spoke to me and said, I want you to go to the mosque. Well, I was still having some fear, and I'm ashamed to admit that, but I was. And so I thought, I've never been to a mosque. I'm a little afraid to go to a mosque. I'm not sure what I was afraid of, but I was. And so again, God's right, I'm always wrong. So I got in the truck and I drove around the corner and pulled into your mosque, half hoping nobody would be there. I have to admit that. And you were there with one of your kids, I believe, and the imam was there. And so I got out of the truck, explained who I was and that we're going to pray for you. Not all Christians feel this way. And we had a great conversation. You and I exchanged phone numbers. And I got in my truck and drove away feeling positive about the experience. And it wasn't but a mile later, God said, why don't you call Mujeeb and ask him if you can bring your prayer meeting to the mosque and pray for them. And in my first response is, wow, I'm in Texas now. I'm new. Wow, I could get in a lot of really interesting hot water for doing this, because if I'm a little nervous about going there, I'm sure some of my people were. But so I said, okay, and I called you, and you were so gracious, and you said, well, tell me how many you'll be bringing, and we'll invite you in for a fellowship meal. And I thought, wow, that is cool. So I went with a lot of fear to my prayer meeting, which is primarily senior adults on Wednesday. And I said, hey, guess what God wants us to do? And they said, what? And I told them, and they said, when? And I said, in about 10 minutes. There's a group of people at the mosque waiting for us. And everybody but two people got up and got in their cars, and we joined in a big circle as a visible sign that we as Christians were praying for the protection of you. And whether anybody saw that or not, we certainly were impacted by it, and hopefully your people were too. And you invited us in. I'm pretty sure that no one, including myself, had ever been in a mosque before, so it was a first time experience, and we had great fellowship. And then after that, we invited you guys to our church for a friendship dinner, and that was a wonderful, wonderful evening. And I've since been there to the mosque several times, and was there breaking Ramadan. Not this, well, we're still in it, but not this time, but a couple years ago. Last year was crazy because of COVID. So that's kind of the story of how all of that happened. And you are an important part of that, because my first contact with a Muslim was Mujeeb, and God could not have put a more gracious person in my path.
On that experience, I would say, how can we bridge the understanding amongst the various religions, particularly the monotheistic religions, so the communities can come closer to eliminate that fear that was out there prior to that incident?
Well, fear is a huge part. I'm really not very interested in sitting around tables debating the theology that separates us. People much smarter than me have done that for hundreds of years, and we are still far apart. As far as the theology, we have differences. So that doesn't interest me much. What does interest me is what you and I have done, and that is we've created relationship. And I have learned to see your heart and meet your family, and see in the hearts of the people that are your brothers and sisters in the mosque. And so for me, the way we bring us together is create relationships, finding ways to just get to know each other. The times we've met at Cotton Patch, and the many times, and just talking and connecting, and praying for your kids who've been in the hospital at times, and those are the ways that we create relationship. And then finding common ground within our communities. And there's a lot of problems that we can work together, that our differences in theology just should not have any impact at all. Just a sense of caring about people, whether they're homeless or whether they're kids, or race relations, or, there's a long list right now. There's plenty of ways that we can do that.
So many things that we can do together to help the communities that are in need, and especially the faith-based organization and the churches and the mosques and the synagogues. if they can all come together, just imagine the magnitude of cohesiveness and the
Yeah.
working team together that we can build and make it. And that does not have to be that, working together does not endangers anyone's to compromise their very basic tenets of their faith.
Right. Right.
So based on that, we can create the respect and understand each other and extend our hands to build a better common ground based, accommodating communities. That's what I think that's what all the religion teaches us, and that's what it all comes down to. So we understand that most of the religions are based on good principles, the principle that is out to spread the love and the respect and the cohesiveness and
Yeah.
support and all that. Why is it the religious faith leaders have not been able to reach the level of success that should have been there based on our teachings?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you had sent those to me earlier, and I spent some time thinking through that. The first thing that comes to my mind is while our religions, in one sense, preach love, we have often not practiced it very well. And my religion, as a Christian, uh, is just as guilty as anyone. There are examples of hate and extremism in each one of our religions, and wow, they have gotten the greater part of the media coverage. They have gotten the greater part of people's attention, and so people who um, are following us are seeing these examples of hate and fear and extremism, and so they're afraid. And so, if the leaders are afraid and not practicing love, then our people probably aren't going to. Another thing I thought of is in my lifetime, and I'm 62. In my lifetime, I've seen a huge influx of Arabs to our country, so that when I was a kid and through my early young adults, I never had any exposure to Arabs in Northeast Ohio. I'm sure they were there. I'm sure they were there, but our communities are pretty segregated, partly because of fear. But over the last years, there have been so many more interactions, and so I didn't have any. Not only did I not have interactions with Muslims, I didn't have interactions with Hispanics, or because of where I lived, it was white or African American. That was just the dynamics of where I lived. And so, when you don't have a relationship, there's fear. I mean, there's just often fear of interacting with someone that you've never interacted with, especially when you hear that their faith is very different and they're out to get you, and that goes both ways. And so, building a relationship with you has been a huge component of me not being afraid and being able to lead my people to not be afraid. And while I'm sure I'm not have been successful with every one of them, there have been a few who have resisted that. But overall, people have responded because I have changed how my outlook was.
It's very strange that that there is a fear out there for no obvious reason. Obviously, the reports that are shown on the media and the mainstream media, and that is very divisive and not true actually, and that actually resonates with the people who are out there on the street. So I think the responsibility of the political people in the political arena, people in the interfaith arena, people who are of some influence, they need to have some sort of understanding among the communities to launch program, such as the very basic ones. How can we take care of our neighbors, for example? There are neighbors in our neck of the wood, the schools that need our help, there are churches that need our help, there are families who need our help. How can we team up together? And just imagine that having a Christian and a Muslim, or maybe any other person, say any other faith, all three of whom walks up to extend the help. And that doesn't make them change their religion or change their faith. It's
Yeah.
just common ground, the humanity that we were there to extend in. So give us like maybe a little bit of rundown of what tangible
Yeah.
things and the steps that we can take to make sure that that stigma or the taboo that has been attached can be alleviated.
Yeah. Well, we've already talked about building relationships,
Mhm.
and you guys have invited our congregation to your mosque, and we have invited you here. We need to do more of that. So, and we need to find ways of doing that on beyond just your mosque and our church or Northwood, that is obviously very active in that. Here's some other examples. For instance, coming up in next week, the fire chief of Watauga has asked for a meeting of all the religious leaders to discuss disaster response. And so, how can we as a faith community help people who, for instance, in the recent winter, storm, where many of our people were without heat or water, and we opened up our church and had people staying. How can we coordinate that? So that's coming together with the fire chief is a great way for religious leaders to take, hey, here's an issue, what can we do? And hopefully there isn't some kind of bombing or worse, but we are living in some crazy days. We have COVID. How can we work together? I think that's a great opportunity. I'm planning on be there and hoping others. We have things like homeless and race relations that could really use people of all different walks of faith and race coming together. It is a visible teaching moment when you and I, or you and some of the many other white Christians get together for lunch. It says to our community, wait a minute, this Arab and this white man can get together. They can actually be friends, and that says something. And so that is important. We are involved in the homeless ministry in a very tangible way. And hopefully I can show you this. We have our people making these homeless mats. That is made out of old Walmart bags, Kroger bags that are ripped up and crocheted together, and they become really soft. They keep people off of the concrete. And so we have our people, many of whom wouldn't be able to go out into the streets and work with homeless. They're crocheting these. We're helping the environment and crocheting them, and then giving them out to homeless people. You could have the mosque and the synagogue and in Christian churches coming together for that. Recently, I made a trip to the border. I rode my motorcycle 1,200 miles down to the border because I wanted to see firsthand what's happening. Because you and I both know the media, it's so hard to get what's actually the truth. It's just so hard to get that. So I rode down there. I had connected with a guy who's doing ministry, helping immigrants who are coming across the border. And so we have just initiated, we are building dignity kits. These are these little bags with, there's shampoo and there's toothbrush and there's a whole bunch of personal items and stuff that we are going to begin collecting and putting these kits together and take a whole trailer load of them down, as well as the homeless mats, because they are working where people are camping out at the border trying to stay in line. I mean, there is Team Brownsville. You'll need to look that up. It's a great interfaith, secular, humanitarian group of people who are just working with Christians and non-Christians and Jews and I'm sure some Muslims there in Brownsville, and they're just setting up, raising all these things and helping people who are coming across the border legally. They're also going across the border where the desperate stories are. But the people who are legally coming in, mostly women and little kids, they are giving them, shoes and some food and these dignity kits, and helping them in all kinds of different ways, and their resources are pouring in from all different places. um, that is just an easy place for us to just be people, be people who care about others. So, and there's a whole lot of other examples, I'm sure, out there.
Absolutely. The that we have things, I would say 90-95% of the things that can work as a common ground for us to take up the initiatives, and that would not only help us develop the relationship, but the
Yeah,
confidence that we need to build and whatnot.
yeah,
The the part of the reason that you and I are talking today is that this our great country offers the freedom of religion, and you can practice your religion, and I can practice my religion, and
yeah,
so does everybody else. And that's the beauty of our country, and I think that legacy need to be carried out around the globe as well. There are places around the world that are deprived of practicing religion, especially those oppressed places, such
yeah,
as you and I have talked about it many times, or the situation that is taking place, humanitarian grounds bases in Kashmir, and unfortunately what's happening in India with the minorities and other parts of the world as well.
yeah.
So
North Korea, China. Yeah,
yeah,
there's lots of it.
there are a lot of places out there that where the freedom of religion is being oppressed, and the people are not given the choices to practice. What role, under your opinion, because you at the leadership, obviously your opinion does matter, and people follow that. So, what suggestion do you have for the government of U.S. as well as the missionaries to make sure that the people around the world are given freedom of practicing their religion, whether it be
Yeah,
Christianity, Islam, or if for that matter any other religion, especially people who are under oppression for the last year and a half in
right.
Kashmir?
Wow. I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer that question. Um, I have to admit to you that I haven't been very successful influencing the leaders of our country to do anything. So, I feel like a little guy out here in a little spot, even though DFW is a pretty big place. Some thoughts. Um, I have serious questions as I study, and I'm not an expert by any means, of our history. I wonder if at times we have made a bigger mess, um, sometimes in an effort to help other countries, if we've not made a bigger mess, and I may be completely wrong about that. Um, I'm not sure how much confidence I have, like currently, with our current leaders to preserve religious freedom here, or in Kashmir, or India, or China, or North. I'm not sure that it's even on their agenda. And I may be completely wrong, and you may know people who are far better qualified. Uh, Pastor Roberts would certainly be more qualified than me to answer that huge question. I would love for our country to preserve it here in a better way. Um, and taking care of our racism issues is really critical. And you, as a person of color, have experienced racism, and you and I have talked about that. And your faith has experienced prejudice and discrimination, and we need to fix that. Yeah, I'd love to see that happen all over. Uh, that just seems so much bigger than where I am living, and I get stressed about those things, and so I try to put my energy into things, tangible things that I can actually make a difference with, and pray and try to vote my conscience. And you and I have talked about that, how hard that is right now. Um, I'd love for our country to fix our problems and be a source of good in the world. I think we should be. That's my hope.
Thank you. I think that brings the end of our show. It was an absolute pleasure and honor to, and look forward to more things. We need to connect back as Ramadan is over, lunch again. By the way, we have not been able to invite our neighbors this time because we are not offering any lunch inside the mosque because of lunch and dinners inside of the mosque. Actually, let me
Yeah.
be politically corrected here. No lunches during the month of Ramadan, only the dinners. But we were not able to do it because of the COVID situation. So
Right.
we are hoping
Yeah.
that we will resume that. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And that brings us to conclude our show. Ladies and gentlemen, take good care of yourself. Until next time, fi amanillah.